Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Writing for Peace Sunday Live reading series. This evening, we have the great honor of welcoming Lauren Camp. She is an amazing poet and writer and artist. I was so excited to see all of her art. In fact, we have a few images queued up to be able to share the screen. And I didn't ask you about that, Lauren. I hope it's okay. It's from the website. We're also featuring her book, Took House, that she will be reading from. And if you have made it this far and showed up for the evening, if you send me an email, and I will post the email in the comments, you will get a digital broadside that we collaborated on today. So the first thing I will do is read Lauren's bio, which is just disappeared on me. Let's see, I'm glowing here in the light. Sorry about that. Lauren Camp is the author of 5 books, most recently Took House, Tupelo Press 2020, which Publishers Weekly calls a stirring original collection. Her poems and interviews have appeared in Witness, Poet Lore, The Rumpus, Dovetails, and other journals in the US and abroad. Honors include the Dorset Prize and the National Federation of Press Women Book Prize, and finalist citations for the Arab American Book Award, the Housatonic Book Award, and the New Mexico Arizona Book Award. Her work has been recognized with fellowships from Black Earth Institute and the Taft Nicholson Center. A visiting scholar, poet at the Mayo Clinic, this year she was selected to be one of 100 international artists for 100 offerings of peace. Her poems have been translated into Mandarin, Turkish, Spanish, and Arabic. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
What I would like to do is show the cover of Took House. We're going to share the screen just a minute, show the cover of the book, and then also 2 images. In just a moment, we're switching over. Share screen. Having technical difficulties. One moment. So do you have them open?
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay. So then you go to, I think it's here. And yep. And then click on the one you want. Yes, there you go.
There it is.
There's the beautiful cover. And what's the name of the artist, Lauren?
Suzanne Sparge. She is an Albuquerque-based artist, and this is mixed media.
It's wonderful. Now, these are older, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but I'd like to share a couple of Lauren's pieces of artwork. We just chose a couple at random. Go ahead with those. These are absolutely stunning, just absolutely.
I'm so excited that you did this. I had no idea you were going to do that, but that's lovely.
Well, it's something that I wanted to do, and I apologize that Carlo and I don't have our technical game down here, but it's just such beautiful work, and I'm attuned visually anyway, so it speaks to me. And then the next one, Carlo? It's no problem.
Do it in a weird way.
This is from, was it the jazz series?
It's from a series I did over a period of about, I don't know, 11 or 12 years called The Fabric of Jazz. And it traveled around the country to 10 museums in 10 US cities and areas shown in museums and cultural centers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Stop the share. Switching back over here. One of the things, no, we don't want to do that one. We'll make it here. So, yes, one of the things that has been important to me is to talk about or bring in people that are involved in a lot of different things. And although this is part of your past, I read online how it also feeds into some of your current work. So maybe we can follow up on that in a little bit. But what did you bring to read for us? What would you like to read first?
I think I'll read a few poems from Took House just to start. The book came out in August 2020. uh, right in the middle of this pandemic, and I have been very excited and grateful to find the reaction to it in this sort of quiet, isolated world that we're living in. People have been just incredibly supportive of the book. So I don't know everyone on the screen, but here we go. Some of you might know the book and some probably don't. I'm going to read the first poem in the book to start us off. I'll read 3 poems. Appetite. And now, in the useless unceasing, there is a heart in one part of town where there is a table that is most like a cliff, a place to render fewer potentials. There is a glass near a bottle that will offer what she asks. In that room, or the next, is an intimate slowing where the woman put down her shield and took out her heart. She put it on the table and looked at the table under the eye of everything that could go wrong, everything that did, each direct chance and the taking of it. Now she tries to explain the way the past wouldn't finish, that the heart was a stipulation, the shade of her hunger, his palm on her marrow. It is the largest muscle, and she let it take over. She let it. The next poem I want to read is called Ask Yourself. Out there, the moon is lunatic. Beneath floorboards, rats build piles of mosses. The cat drags birds to the porch, often cataloging carcasses. Many times, awe, then stupid variables. Every dawn, I remade the bed with urgency, then returned through the cobalt canvas sky. And the third poem I want to read is, so there are 3 elements that run through the book. There's a relationship, and then there are poems about raptors, and maybe I'll read one of those later. And there are ekphrastic poems, which are poems about art and or artists' processes. And I want to read a poem from one of the artists' poems inspired by the photography of Annie Leibovitz. The poem is called Best Portrait. In the morning, with her largest lens, each frame allows a sudden opening. She climbs the ladder, eyes, shoulders, skin. It is a long walk to the end of a face. In the afternoon, image becomes excursion, the pleasure of finding the shape of a stranger in the curve of a lens. Nothing shelters the shot, no distraction. Each gesture is bundled in whispers. The evening's penitent light and the hard eye of flash leads to rumor. Then the picture spills out by itself.
In the poems that you just read, as well as some of the comments in the interviews, one was at the Rumpus about color and the unknown, how that plays through, and that there's echoing of I believe, your art that carries on, even though it's not your art, it's your new art, your new way of presenting in the world in a way.
Yeah, there's a lot of repetition in a way, in various ways in the collection, not exact repeats, but repetition of objects, of elements. But art figures into my writing in some pretty significant ways, in that it's one of two forms of education that I had in poetry. The 2 strongest, art and sound, music. And for the 12 or 14 years that I was manipulating color and pattern and texture and composing things, deciding what was in and out of the canvas effectively. Um, all of that got transferred over in some way that seems like a very direct fit for me into poetry, though that may not really be so. It just seems like the words I'm using have color and texture and pattern. And so to me, it's clear. But and then sound, I was also a radio DJ for 15 years and intermixing music and different genres of music and building segues and putting poems in there. And those two different media, different genres, fed into the poetry in extremely significant ways. They are really the underpinning of the way I write.
Well, there was a quote, we turned on a light here, but I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. I'll have to turn on another light. Obviously, our tech here is sorely lacking, but for me as a synesthete, I was intrigued to read that color was the sensation I trafficked in the start of this collection, and that you spent, a quote, spent hours moving colors toward each other, trying to find perfectly dangerous matches. And that just fired off for me in a lot of different ways, being a writer and an artist. So I was curious as to your, not only some of your literary heritage, who's in your literary tree that you would actually admit to, that was important to you or formative to you, but also on the artistic end, maybe Annie Leibovitz, because you mentioned her and there was the poem, but.
Yeah, it's actually in some ways more interesting to me. I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble for this, but to acknowledge the other influences. So art influences range certainly for the artists that I've covered in the book: Robert Rauschenberg, Donald Judd, a lot of minimalist artists, Eva Hesse. Let's see who else. But also, I would say some of the artists that were in some way dealing with African American themes, collage themes. Romare Bearden, Jacob Lawrence. Just the people, the artists especially are the ones that I'm drawn to for different things, for the ways they put things together, as in Robert Rauschenberg, or for the ways they completely eliminate things. Richard Serra and his huge steel sculptures that manipulate space. And then I would also say other influences. In my most specific music influence is Thelonious Monk, whose idea of sound also included silence as part of the sounds he was manipulating. So those are some of my influences.
That's fantastic. It's made me think about a question I forgot to ask you, so we'll get to that in a moment. But to kind of hop off of that color, it's a quote, color has a voice, a way of speaking, of whispering. So then I wondered, in response to that, is a lack of tint or lighter hue silence, or is white space silence for you?
Oh, it's a great question. And it's a great question because I'm going to, because one of the things I'm working on now is writing in response to the artist Agnes Martin's work, which is spaces of quiet, spaces, it's lines and grids that are tinted but are not dramatic. And those, in a way, they're not silence. They get to hold whatever I need them to hold. So it's kind of, it's they might be peace, or they might be holding, who knows, angst. I mean, they could hold anything. There's space to do that.
I look forward to seeing more or hearing more about it. So we can hold off a bit on the question I forgot to ask you. And how about if we hear something else? What else do you have for us to read?
How about if I read you one or two of those poems about Agnes Martin? You will be the first audience I'm reading any to. And
that will be fabulous.
it seems like a good time. I have a full manuscript together. I've been working on it for 4 or 5 years. I began shortly after Donald Trump was elected, and yeah, I see people making faces. Excellent. I I didn't really begin it with the intention of with a project. I began it because I needed those quiet spaces. I needed some kind of calm at a time when our nation and possibly the world seemed so chaotic and dangerous and threatening. And so so I just began writing poems inspired by or in conversation with the artist Agnes Martin. And if you don't know her work, um, it is very quiet. She considered it abstract expressionist. You might look at it and think it's minimalist, but she did not like that idea. So I'll read you two poems from this collection. The first is called An Entire Negative. Sometimes empty is what I do with myself. I'm at either side of the ocean to know how far the breath can go. The bus takes a corner past an uprooted big leaf maple. I don't recognize anything but the hem of water, and I'm glad for the upcoming repeat. All I want is the calm. Piles of shells throated from waves, poles, a meadow, a storefront, all generous and empty. I don't want to be in the middle of what's left, just the ripple of directions and crowing. And the second poem I'll read is, at least currently, the last poem in the collection, A Change of Nothing. I spend these days in the antique gaze of Agnes's eyes and her buttoned up dressing of silence to expose the episodic echo of all she ever knew. If she were pronouncing one thing, it seemed to enlarge. I take a break and slice a loaf and watch for longing. The kitchen is in constant muss, and I eat all the parts that have been left. I've never been older. I am content to let those around me explain the proportions of their shadows. Today's rain knocked slow on the roof, a perfect monotony. In the small photo, I notice Agnes frames the room, and the room where she sits is built chummy around her. Intangible sun, her reliable body. I am close to her thick tufts of hair. Her eyes fill with seawater, her face in its later pieces looking at empathy. Something is happening. She is looking through her own set of rules. Outside each window, crickets piled on top of each other. I don't believe there is nothing. I believe in that long blue stare in slanted sunlight, whatever she spotted. It is late. The sky has now gone on to sleeping. I won't tell you I understood, only that this supple lush of ritual is capable of a once upon a time, and I wanted to see it, to hold the world to its grain, to wisdom its missing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Those are wonderful poems.
Thank you.
Such delicious words and images. It, mine took off in many different ways. I'll have to kind of settle down here into one thread. And I'm wondering, and I guess some of our audience might too, is how did you land on Agnes? How did you choose to write a book deeply connected to her, which it sounds very deeply connected to her?
It is deeply connected to her, although some of the work has nothing overt that you would recognize about her. I live in New Mexico, and I know Agnes's work from here because she lived here for probably about the second half of her life. Um, So I've spent a lot of time standing in front of her paintings in Taos. There's a permanent gallery, and I've seen her work elsewhere. I knew her story. I've followed her work, and I don't know why at that moment, other than the fact that we had this uh, crazy man in our most powerful position in the country. I don't, other than that, I don't exactly know why, but I needed to feel safe, and her paintings made me feel safe. So I thought I'd try to figure out, not, the poems are not exactly, they're not historical, they're not biographical, they're about her, they're about what I see in the paintings, they're about putting myself in there. Um, they're about what I needed from the paintings. They're about why she did them. Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. Truly, I mean, completely immersed, responsive writing.
It was a really wonderful project, and I was at a residency near the ocean, so I was a long way from my desert home. So I got to explore the water and that landscape, and also her work at the same time. It was a great project. It was a great escape.
Sounds wonderful. So I had a question related to, let's go back to the beginning question that I missed, and that I was remiss about doing in the beginning with after the technical problems we had. And that is, what was a formative, or who was a formative author? What was a formative book from your youth that may still resonate today? Maybe, maybe not, but was formative anyway.
Okay, so I have show and tell because I knew this question was coming, and I thought through a lot of different possibilities. But the book that I landed on is, well, I'll show it to you because I just dug it out from my shelves. It's a very, very old, very broken version of Mary Poppins and Mary Poppins Comes Back. It's a linen cover. It is thoroughly disintegrating. This book, so I didn't actually really have books growing up. I didn't have my own books. I had library books, and I had the books I scavenged from around my house. Um, this was a book, and you have to understand that I pulled it off my shelf yesterday just to see. My memory of it was a big, fat, huge book. It's not that big. It's illustrated. Um, but I was a little girl, and I took this book with me every summer when we went to visit my grandparents. We would get on a plane and we would fly. I think it was really the only place we went. We would fly to Oklahoma, and I had this book, and I would read it on the way there and the way back. And it was the perfect length for the trip, going from New York, where I lived, where I grew up, to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and back home. And I did it every year for a long time. And I haven't looked at the book in a very long time. I've carted it with me around the country. So actually, I was particularly grateful to have to pull it out and get to hold it. But I remember it as a big fat book, and I remember feeling so successful at reading it and so immersed in it. And part of the reason that this is the book I picked is because it was a book I read and reread and reread. And I don't get to do that very often because there's so many books that I want to read.
Yes.
But there is that, but it is also the story of possibility and imagination and what you can do if you want to believe. And I think that was a very valuable story for me. I was, as to the best of my memory, I was very much an individualist as a kid. I was very happy to either be immersed in art or in reading, any world that could be made. And I was very happy in those worlds. And my house was not fully set up for the art, so that was a different scavenging project. But the last thing I want to say about this book is it, because I now know because I looked it up, it on the copyright page. It first came out in, I think, 1935, And the version I have is from 1943, which means it was a gift to my mother, who would have been 3 or 4 at the time. So it would have been my mother's book. And so there's a sentimentality to it also now that my mother's not around anymore. And so anyway, that's the book I want to tell about.
It's a lovely connection. And then a book of that era still smells of pulp and fiber. You can probably still smell the ink of it as you feel and hear the spine open. So very
Yeah.
lovely. Yeah, thank you. We have, I'm going to scroll, let's see if there's other questions or just the one. There's a question here. And so I want to pose it now before we move on, if that's okay. Are you able to see it also?
Oh,
Um, do you think there's a space for what one might think of as heroic poetry, a la Beowulf, but geared to great women, strong leaders, compassionate hearts? Or would that feed into a culture of setting soul people onto pedestals, creating more in a way of differentials and classism, like Odes to Mary Oliver, RBG? There's a couple of examples. And that's from Laura Mahal. Great question, Laura.
beautiful question. I kind of want to be able to think about heroic poetry also in an intimate way, in a personal way. So I think if I can think about it in that way, um, that it doesn't have to be put, like if I look at a few of the people that I've written about, where I've really devoted a lot of work to, which would include Agnes Martin, who was a very complicated person, and the and I guess I like complicated people. The other person that I wrote into and around for a chunk of a book was Mabel Dodge Lujan, who who was very
That's
important
insane.
to the New Mexico art scene, and to sort of valuing artists of all sorts of the arts. But neither of those women were by any means perfect, or I mean, they were both complicated, and complicated in very different ways. In some ways, they were both, especially Agnes, very unknowable, and I kind of like that better than the most um, the the clearest, the most clear that we can find. But I think I want to believe that that's a kind of heroic poetry also, whether it's mine or anybody's, who's holding up someone who's returning to us someone who might be of value to look at in some new way. Um,
Yes. What a fabulous answer. I have a favor to ask of you, and I don't know if everybody's internet cut out or if it was just ours, but I missed the two names. We got everything else but the two names you mentioned.
the two names of the people that I wrote about, well, Agnes Martin is one who I've now lived with for a long time in my way, and Mabel Dodge Lujan.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure it was part of the video recording in case everybody else didn't get it too. Thank you so much. And thank you, Laura, for the question also. So how about if we move to some more writing? Let's hear some more of your words. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess I think I'm going to go back to Took House, and read you a couple of poems from that. I want to read the poem that Juniper made a beautiful broadside of this poem, and so I think I want to read it to you. It's called "The Night Clouds Wrestled the Sky." And actually, I'm just going to, before I read it, pause for a second and say that when I first began writing this book, I began writing it in 2005, and I was still making art at the time. I was trying to do both. I was doing different things with the two mediums, but at some point in the process, I stopped making art. This is not really relevant specifically to this poem. I just kind of want to give this background information. I worked on this collection for 15 years, and part of in various ways. Well, I worked on it from 2005 until the publisher accepted it. But part of what I was working on was trying to make the story that I was telling not entirely mine or fresh or unexpected or um, just surprising to me. And some of that required time and some of that required coming back into the poems. I dumped a lot of the poems that I initially wrote for the collection. I turned things around. I just flipped the manuscript every which way and the poems because I wanted something that was not just, here's the story I'm trying to tell you. I wanted that very much. Okay, so back to the poems. I'll read two from here. This one's called The Night Clouds Wrestled the Sky. At that moment, I was blind to the sorrow and stop that was coming. For that gentle hour, I settled into the only split in the road where I still saw the purple reflection of day slipping from cedar and aspen. Air temperature as skin would shift to bare and brisk. But in the sky, unguarded orange shadows advanced, and clouds extended to unkempt corners, the desert's chambers of gray. Trees unfurled their fluted, five-petaled, veined fingers. Precision worth noting. What else should we look at but fugitive color, the shape that's not empty? So little of what happens belongs to us. Only the frequent sense of being encircled. After light was stripped from the scarlet wall, a string of birds armed long branches, rhapsodizing. I had entered the chatter-curved worship of their bursting, the song grafted to the moon's musky discipline. Once their noise was placed, it remained in my mind for years. Not a coincidence that I heard and saw a final stray sweep of sun as pigment and chord, and would summon it again next time I was swallowed, beat down. That night, the sky came up to my lips. It tasted of wind and gave me something to miss.
Such a lush poem.
Thank you. You want to hear another one?
Yes.
Okay. So I mentioned that there are these three elements, these three components to the book: ekphrastic poems, the relationship that kind of holds through the whole book, and there are poems of raptors. Um, the raptor poems. So ekphrastic poems were easy for me. They were comfortable for me. They're a thing that I do, as you can sort of tell from my new project working on Agnes Martin responses. They were poems that I was already doing regularly. I like writing in response in some way to artwork. The raptor poems were a totally different thing. They were raptors are something I'm interested in and knew very little about. So that was a research project. That was something that I sat down and started to say, how do I learn? What can I learn and how do I use this? So those three components sort of tie in together. They either speak to each other or give a break from something. I hope they in some ways do both. So I'm going to read you one of the raptor poems. Sharp-shinned hawk. Days are barely at zero. Take wind shear as palace, pleasure layer, depth. The bird raises its head from a chest soft with down. From above, the land is scars sown with narrow eyes. Steady, steady. It swerves and lurks in hackberry, soapberry, mesquite, as if one could ride a sun to luck. One does, behold. Between flaps and gliding, it nests inside some tighter aspen branches. Eats first crickets as small delicacy before its centered eyes triangulate on songbirds, sparrow, thrush in gentle grass, bounty, bounty, bounty.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Then I'm having, I want to be able to focus and not take notes, but I wanted to take notes about what you were saying about gaps or spaces right before, because it made me think of something that I had read online. And you had stated, maybe I'm a poet of questions or gaps. Is there a question or gap that is yet unanswerable? That's been elusive, or for you, that maybe a poem that you haven't been able to fill that gap, or maybe a poem where you haven't been able to create that gap. Is there one that you keep coming back to?
Of someone else's, you mean, or my own?
Your own, yes. It could be
Um,
someone else's if you want to, if you'd rather go down that path.
I think most of my poems, um, I think most of my poems are like that for sometimes for long stretches. Um, I teach, and I'm forever telling my students that what you want is a surprise or multiple surprises. And there are any number of ways to get that. And one of the ways, like the surprise could be in the content, the surprise could be in the way you tell it, the way you approach it. The surprise could be in the way it looks on the page, or any number of other things. The surprise could be in the thing you said that you don't know why you said it. Um, so I think for me, maybe what I want is for all my poems to have that. Uh, I'm not sure that I want a resolution. I want a resolution, but I'm not sure I want to tie things up and close the poem, because I want you in there. I want all each of you in there to have your own experience and to put your own meaning to it and to go further with it. And so I don't really want to say, here it is, this is the end, this is what you need to take from it. Also, I've realized that in the last few books, I've been asking more questions within the poems, and I'm not necessarily answering those questions. I'm floating them, and I kind of like that.
Yes. I believe it was Robert Wrigley that said in the series that a good poem is a question.
Yeah.
And then somebody else has said since then that a good poem is never the answer. I think it was another way of turning it around and saying it. So it's lovely how we come back to that in the dance of the question and answer on the page.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think the other thing that goes with that is if there's a question and an answer, there's a conversation. And I like that. I think in some ways poems need audience, whether it's an intimate private reading or it's a public, private reading where we're each holding the book and reading to ourselves, or it's a public reading. I think poems are not really alive until they get passed to someone. So,
Lovely. Mhm. So in that vein, we have another question. This one's from Cynthia Atkins. Hi, Lauren. Beautiful reading. I'm wondering how you see the I in your poems.
well, the I, hi Cynthia, great to see you. The I in my first drafts is typically me, because that's what I know and that's where I'm starting. And that's part of why I like to wait and I like to work and I like to turn things around, because I know me, and I'm okay with that. That's fine. But I'm interested in something that's not quite me, that's not exactly me. Um, and so that I sometimes gets a little bit, I don't know, sometimes it shifts. Sometimes it becomes a little wider. Sometimes it encompasses others. Um, Sometimes I'm actually legitimately writing from that perspective of an I that is entirely not me, that is Mabel Dodge Lujan, or that is my mother, or that is someone else entirely, and I'm stepping into that space and trying to do right, see in a way that is that honors that person. So the I is, and I guess even then that I probably has a tinge of me because I'm somehow unable to get out of the way. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but the I is a me, typically is a me that is also maybe um, trying not to be entirely me. Yeah.
I believe it was an answer to the question. That answer may change in a month or 2 years, depending on your routine, but I think it was lovely insight to where you're at right now. So thank you. So are you ready to read some more?
Oh, okay. I think I want to read a poem. You know, I've been stuck, I mean, not stuck because I love my house and I love where I live, but I've been stuck in this house for 10 months, more or less, except for walks out on the trail and very, very, very few errands. So I thought I would read you a poem that I wrote within the last 10 months. um, about this situation that we are in. The poem is called, and again, I this is a poem I haven't read to anybody, so it's really kind of nice to put it out in conversation with you and try it out on you. The poem is called Living Room. I have watched 30 movies of sheep and fields spreading slow to the future, and of course, I've stayed in my house. Shredded to the country's mortal glower, I selected more movies to learn every road and bend of history and testimonies of hardship. With the man I love, I watch half every night after a Manhattan, which I never had until after I'd left Manhattan, the rye burning slightly my throat. I am as holied with movies about structures around the world as with wind bedding the forests. Do you remember how March careened? April got smaller. We were already watching movies then and watched movies with each death that tore our states crooked with statistics and governor's warnings and cases and cases. We also watched movies with squadrons and despots, blood in all of this, and trucks and store signs. Every night, ill prepared, eating and not belonging. To abandon the pursuing present, we watch movies of Malcolm X and movies of walls in Israel and the sound of economies. All through them, I hold the cat in my arms. I need her fur and courage. She is dying, and I've known this. Or she is not dying if I tighten my hold. Each movie comes to an end. In the last few days, the cat has developed a smell that I suppose is her organs. My father bubbled blue bile the final days of his life. After each half a movie, I proceed to read the plundering news aloud with this cat in my arms. Beside the living room window, the shape of future hours. We talk of doors, of obedient problems, smudges of work. The movies are ritual and concoction. The movies are for unbinding the jumble of storms I've been feeling. And because we only watch half, they are a fragment or a resistance. When the cat dies, we still watch movies. We drag through half of another one about women or gardens or vibrations of time. On the table, a greeting card apologizes her warm eyes. Roses the vet sent already unclutching. The fate of the characters in each movie matters. I watch for witnesses and tangles, shorelines and feasts. So many movies. I think now of edits and widening spaces and my childhood where the air was sticky and hydrant splashed, or porched, or frozen. And whatever it did, People threw basketballs, and my family watched as the car went along, loaded with us. Were we a story? We drove in the foreground. Our brown house spoke a language we all understood, the nameless trees, and on what side we should sleep. Tonight, when I climb into bed under the wool blanket with its wrinkles, and my love is falling shut to sleep, I whisper what I think of the latest movie's fringes, its motions, the camera angles.
What a beautiful poem. It
Thank you.
echoes many things that I believe that I read online, as well as, of course, some images that we all can relate to in some different ways. My dog was here chewing on the bone, and I was afraid it was echoing through the speaker as you were reading earlier, and how those pets are important to us during these times,
That's so
especially.
critical. Yeah.
So what we've posed several times in the readings is what maybe have you done, not just to make it through the pandemic, but to make a difference in the pandemic? Or has writing been robust, or has writing and creativity been limited? You know, that everybody has been processing differently and moving through it differently. Walks and cats are important. Like,
Writing has been, honestly, it has been boring. I like to write from something that happens, something I see, something surprising. And so my field of vision is smaller, and I'm looking harder at things, which is its own lesson. And that's interesting. But I think the thing I've done that has mattered most to me, and I hope has mattered to a number of other people, the thing I've done through the pandemic that has kept me very sane and very satisfied, at least at times, is teaching. Because a lot of the people I teach are older, and a number of them are in that vulnerable population uh, that is extremely concerned about leaving home. And it feels very thrilling and very communal to be together with people. I have one of my students is here in the room, and I'm really happy to see her. It is it's like an infusion of positivity. I get to share with them things I love. I get to bring into a group setting things we can talk about and things we can get excited about, things we can try. And so, I hope I'm giving something to them, but oh boy, are they giving something back to me in a way that is very, very valuable.
after spending such a short time with you, I can't imagine them not receiving a great deal from you. So just that's a lovely way to or a panacea, or to work your way through the pandemic with teaching. A lovely way. We have a couple of questions. I'm going to back up here, and
Okay.
one is, does the musical impress you or bore you? And that's from Kate.
Okay, I don't see that question. The musical, the idea of,
Yeah, it's a capital M, musical. It's,
I,
it's at 5:30.
I, Kate, can you ask the question in a different way? Because I don't think I understand it exactly. You're muted. Unmute and ask it.
Sorry, that was
Okay.
in reference to Mary Poppins.
Oh, I saw the new musical. That's what you're talking about?
Yes,
Uh,
either an old one or an old, yeah, either way.
I love the old one. I love the old one. The new one, I sort of like. How's that? But I love the old one with Dick Van Dyke.
The old one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I could sing the whole thing.
I know. I mean, my husband had never seen it, and so that was one of our movies. And I was so happy to see it again after a long time. So,
They've been fun to revisit. So the next one is from Carolyn Wright, and it's, "Hi Lauren, great reading. I would like to ask you how to deal with transgressive or bad women in your work, women who break rules or make new rules."
Hold them up and, honor that. Hi, Carolyn. I mean, I absolutely think that perfection is so boring, that just steady goodness is very flat. And like Mabel Dodge fascinated me because she's, depending, like there were certain times I wrote a whole book around her in some way, my fourth book, Turquoise Door. And there's sometimes certain situations where I was afraid to say that I had written about her because people would start to lecture me about what a not good person she was. And 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 then there are parts of her that are remarkable. So I think, what's the saying, everything that has a front has a back. I think it's kind of nice to deal with someone who's that complex. um, in my artwork, since Juniper brought it up, in my jazz series, one of the people that I ended up doing a portrait of was Benny Goodman, who was in some ways remarkable, and in some ways in some ways he was cheap, in some ways he was super demanding. And I really wanted to highlight the music, and I had such a hard time um, deciding whether I should leave him out of the realm of what I wanted to cover in the series, and ultimately decided, he did his band was the first integrated band. I mean, that was a huge important step, um, and a statement to make. And I decided, no, you could have both. That a portrait could cover both, or elements of a portrait. And in poems, sometimes I'm covering that in the art piece, it's one piece, but in poems, sometimes you get to do it through multiple pieces. So if you are drawn to something that has transgressive behavior, do it, write it, explore it. Absolutely. I think I might want to read that.
Yes, I think we need more of that. A lovely answer. I would like to, Carla's going to share the screen with the broadside, and I want to remind people, if you would like a copy, please send an email. It's in the comments to Juniper J. Moon, and I will send you a digital copy. He's going to share it momentarily. I just wanted to show you briefly, and then I'd like to close out with the poem for you. So we're going to switch over now before my tech guy disappears on me. It is.
It's so beautiful.
It's watercolor painted and on vellum, and of course this is digital, so you don't get to fill the paper or the bite or anything like that. But I had a tough time deciding last night on Lauren's poems that she sent and shared with me, because I would get lost in the images and what I said earlier, the delicious words of it all. So if you would like, I have done a few digital ones. I don't know if I told you, Lauren, two of the last digital ones I did, one was for Jane Hirschfield and the other one was for Kim Stafford for Trade.org. And maybe I can share those with you too later. So thank you. Yeah, you can scroll down and show the bottom. The image goes all the way down the side and then at the bottom. So if you would like it, please remember to email me, and we're going to hop out of the screen now. Thank you so much. And we have time for another poem. Let's close out on a poem if that's okay. And we are going to keep the chat open for just a few minutes so you can say hello. And if there's any questions you didn't ask, we're going to keep it open 5 to 10 minutes, depends on what people are available and who sticks around. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be glad to read another poem. And before I do, let me say thank you for being here. I am so happy to be here. I'm so excited to be in this new year, starting over, hopefully starting better. And this is just a beautiful, wonderful way to do that, to reconnect with Writing for Peace, and And to start the year so very early in the year, I mean, this is auspicious for me. This is also as I understand, the 10th year of Writing for Peace, a gorgeous organization. So congratulations on that longevity. Anyway, it's thrilling, and I'm really happy everybody is here. I kind of just drag through the holidays and December every year, and so this is really just very heartening to be here. Okay, I'll read one short poem. It's another ekphrastic poem. It's inspired by Georgia O'Keeffe, a painting of hers from 1949 called Black Place, Gray and Pink. And the poem is called Black Place. And I'm interrupting myself because this I, Cynthia, is multiple eyes. So I'm just interrupting to acknowledge that. Okay, the poem is Black Place. I sit between black lava and ash, dust brushed and shaken amid suggestion of bone. In the curve of the place without sky, rose-lipped clouds, first grinding of pigment and palette, knife, broken pastel, 1,000 forms of time.
What a lovely way to close out. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and your words and your lovely energy. Just really appreciate it, Lauren.
It's a pleasure.
So I'm going to hop over here and see if I can use my son's gizmo to unmute everybody who may be muted. So you can all say hello.
Please.
Or let me see.
Oh, it worked. It worked.
Here you are.
For one person. I gotta, let's see. Carlos? There, I'm gonna have him do it. It's a smaller and a different format and platform. It's going to be just a moment.
I was
I was just able to
struck
unmute
by,
myself. I was just able to unmute myself.
I think it might depend on when you joined. So
Oh, okay. I
okay.
joined a little late.
it's okay.
Yeah,
Just glad you're here.
I wanted to
me too.
I wanted to ask a question.
Okay.
One of the things I was very compelled by your poems and found them very interesting. But one of the things I was wondering was about the shape of your poems, about their beginnings, middles, and ends, and how we should read you. Do we read you as one long poem, or do we read you as a set of distinctive poems, um, as a kind of evolving process? More or less like something like Leaves of Grass or something like that.
So it's a wonderful question. The poems I read you tonight look different on the page from each other. The movie poem Living Room is all one long stanza. But most of the poems, a number of the poems in Tocal's vary in structure. I think that's because I am basically a fickle person and get, like I get tired of things. They stop seeming, they stop having energy for me if I keep doing it the same way over and over. So I think that's part of the surprise for me, is to throw to throw a new shape into it, or to sort of push the shape in a way, not in a way that's just random, but that is intentional to the poem. So like the last poem I read you, Black Place, has what is a kind of like a haiku at the end. It's kind of a very distilled section that holds the ending of the poem. So that's part of my decision in making the meaning have more meaning, I guess, is how it looks. and having said that, that's no statement against anyone who can write steadily in sonnet form or in any form repeatedly. Um, I can absolutely admire that. That just doesn't work for me. That doesn't mean that I can't ultimately put, 14 things together that I've written all as single stanzas, but I will have had to have written them with 75 other things in between that take me in other directions.
But do you write with the reader in mind and how you intend to engage the reader or how you want to manipulate the reader's response? Not manipulate, but engage the reader's response.
I don't write with the reader in mind for a while. It's kind of enough of a task. I guess task is the right word, to write with my determination in mind first, and that might last for, I don't know, 3 or 12 or 25 iterations of the poem. Where I begin to look at the reader is when I start, either when I send things out to be published or when I put poems together into a manuscript. Because then I know there is someone who has to go from page 1 to page 2. And so then I'm actively looking at what might a reader get from this? Where might a reader begin or land, or what am I trying to communicate? But I don't honestly think about a reader for a long while. As I mentioned early, I was a child very much in my own world, not even a dreamy child, really. I just was busy creating for myself for a very long time. My parents didn't, they were good parents. They were fine. They did what they needed. They got food on the table, and I had a house and I had a bed, and they took me places and bought me clothes, whatever they had to do, but nobody cared about my creative anything. It was a thing I did, and it was a thing that completely entranced me, continues to, but completely entranced me. And in some ways, as an adult looking back on it, in some ways, I think it was sort of a gift that nobody gave one hoot what I was doing, what I was making, because I didn't have any kind of critical voices. I was making for me, and that's it. And I was trying to get onto the paper, or in whatever form I was doing, I was trying to get my vision. And I wasn't hard on myself, and nobody else was hard on me. And so that's still, I think, where I operate, from the
I,
place of self first. Um,
Yeah, I think we have
Hello,
yeah,
I have a question.
Kate,
Hello? Am I still muted?
no,
No.
you're
Good.
there.
Hi, sorry. Lauren, my question is, I really loved Living Room. It was so expansive. So it really captured in this moment of this time and the actual living room and all of the things evolving from it. And then as you ended into the technical aspects of the movies you'd seen and what the lighting and tech was just brilliant. But my question is, what is your favorite Mabel Dodge Lujan book? Mine is Over the Edge of Taos.
Oh, I don't know. That's a hard question. I do love how that's a hard question. I love how honest she is in her writings. I don't think I want to pick a book of
Okay,
her.
well, I love her.
It was, so I did a residency at the Mabel Dodge House in maybe 2014. I had 2 weeks. I got to be on her grounds in her property. And I went up there with zero interest in her history until about hour 6. I was like, I had projects I was working on. I was very busy. I was trying to get my 3rd book done. And 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 it's fabulous up there. And to anyone who doesn't know, the Mabel Dodge Lujan House is in Taos, and it is where she invited many people to come and stay. It was like an early artist residency, where she said, "Here, I have a place. Let me host you, house you, and you create. I want you to create." And people like D.H. Lawrence and Georgia O'Keeffe and like very big, important people came through that, were introduced to New Mexico and had time to create. But I went up there with no intention of exploring her. And there was something, like there's a lot of her left there. And I immediately, seriously, hour 6, I was like, okay, let me get in conversation with you. And this is the best way I can do it, is to start writing it out. So, yeah.
Are there other questions, or anybody want to say hello? Anybody want to
Just hello.
show yourselves?
Yeah,
Hi.
yeah, hello. This
This
was a great reading. This is great. I'm happy to have come upon this group, Writing for Peace. I didn't know about it before. I
Well-
mean, you'd think I would, but this is my first, hello, it's good to be here.
It's great to have you here, but also, Carolyn, there are the readings are recorded, and you can listen to some of the back readings, and you really should, because there are beautiful authors, and the readings are pretty wonderful. So
It's glad
That's
you
great.
found this, Carolyn.
Well, this one was terrific. I mean, I'm inspired. I'm very inspired. I'm gonna.
thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
And Lauren, I just want to say thank you so much for being our very first reading of the year. It's just been wonderful. And thank you, Juniper. You're fabulous. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Oh, it's nice to see you all.
But
It's nice to
Nice
see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you all. And Lauren,
We'll be in touch.
I wanted to mention, you might want to look at some of the comments before you go. I try to write them down for the readers and email them to them. So that if you have a chance. And I know there are a few people still here. Next week, it's Leah Purpura. She is a poet
Oh, yeah.
and essayist. I absolutely love her essays, and she'll be joining us next Sunday. Leah
That's
Purpura.
great. That's great.
I have a question.
I just saved the chat. Everybody can, I think, depending upon your system, you can save the chat, which I
Okay.
just did.
Yeah.
Juniper,
Yes,
can you put your email in the chat?
I did earlier, but I can do it
Oh.
again. It's up towards the top, but
Yeah,
I can
it
do
is
it again.
there. It is there.
So I want to make sure I can get everybody the broadside if they want it.
Yeah,
Carolyn,
absolutely.
Carolyn, you can hear Cynthia's great talk, which is great. So she's also recorded. And where are they? Are they on the Writing for Peace? I think I've gone through Facebook. That's where. Okay.
There, if you go to the
Facebook,
website,
yeah,
link.
I'll go to the website because Facebook is always a little, erratic. Sometimes the algorithms let you receive things and other times they don't. So, I'm glad I discovered this. I have no idea why, but I'm going to go to the website and look at a few of the other readings and listen to them. That's been one of the ironic benefits of all this COVID, shutdown, lockdown, has been, enforced staying in and paying attention to things that we can access from within the home, readings and the radio and whatever, streaming films. Yeah.
Yeah.
it-
that's a lot.
Was it through Olympia Poetry Network that you learned of it, Carolyn?
I believe it may have been Olympia Poetry Network or Poets Northwest or, that Poets NPNW, something like that. One of those groups. I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I know I posted with Olympia Poetry Network. I was
Yeah,
just checking because I know
I-
a few people we picked up from posting there.
Yeah. I did get that
So
one.
real
I
good.
did
I'm
get
glad
that
you
one.
found
Yeah.
it. Real good. That's very good. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add for the good of the order. Please remember to email me your email address if you'd like the broadside. I'd really like to send it to people. And I know that I have gotten a few emails already. And I am going to see if I can figure out. I looked before if I could save the chat, and when I looked, I couldn't find a way. So let's see.
If you go to the little chat, the little voice balloon icon at the bottom, at least on my computer, there's a little sort of soft rectangle with 3 dots, 3 horizontal dots in it. And if you click on that, there's a save chat option. A little drop down appears,
Yeah.
and you can save the chat.
Oh, got it.
Yep.
Good.
Beautiful.
God, when did I become a techno geek? I can't do most things, but I figured out a few.
I typically prefer my letterpress, so let's see.
Wonderful.
Cynthia, this isn't like meeting up with you at AWP, but it's the best we can do, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, in the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
That's where I see all the writers in the bathroom.
Yeah, that's the best place to meet the women writers anyway, or the non-binary, whatever. Yeah. I've had great conversations in AWP bathrooms. Or in the line to get into the bathroom.
Carmel,
Yeah.
Juniper, thank you so much. This has been just such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tomorrow's
Yes,
my
thank
birthday.
you. And Lauren,
This
I
is
owe
the
you an
best
email, I think. I'm
present.
going to write you. Yeah.
Yay, I'm glad you were here, Kate. Happy birthday.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
happy birthday.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Not 70 yet, but almost.
Okay. We're celebrating whatever it is.
Nice to connect with everybody.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thanks for coming.
Thank
Thank you,
Lauren. That was
everybody. Thank you.
fabulous.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Okay.
Happy New Year,
Thanks so
everybody.
much.
And
Thank you,
congratulations on 10 years.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Awesome, Carmel.
it's amazing.
Beautiful.